welcome everyone to the October Potpourri. That's not what I'm doing. That's not what I'm doing. It's interesting that you're pointing that out, but
Okay. Is everyone, can everyone hear me loud and clear?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So as the title say, and as you all must have seen in the email threads, which I've been pushing out about my newly made finished base. Uh, so the story goes, okay. Yeah. Before jumping on to the story, I'll just get it out of the way. Most of you must have already know about this, what a Dobsonian base is. A Dobsonian telescope is an optically a Newtonian reflector mounted on a altitude azimuth mount with a low and stable center of gravity. It was popularized by John Dobson from the San Francisco Sidewalk Astronomers. I copied this paragraph from stellafane.org. They also added John Dobson actually does not like his name to be used to refer to this design. He's been saying it for years that this design is being used to mount cannons for centuries. Do not name it after me, yet still people adorably call them Dobsonians. Okay, this is basically anatomy of a Dobsonian scope. It has an optical tube. Let me see if I can get a laser pointer. Awesome. So here's a optical tube. You all know about it. Here's a spider bolt. Here's a finder scope. Here's a cradle, side bearing. But the thing which I really wanted to focus on, because I had already acquired an optical tube, I was interested in making a Dobsonian base. And this screenshot was taken from the Stellafane website, where they had instructions about how to make a Dobsonian base. Uh, but the approach which they had about their design was they wanted to make a scope from scratch, which means they did not have the pre-made mass-produced side bearing on the sides of optical tube. So they were suggesting to make a cradle, which I did not want to do because I wanted to keep the job simple for me as much as possible because I do not have all the power tools. So I wanted to eradicate any unnecessary design. So in the Dobsonian base, as I said earlier, most of you must already know, there are side panels, front board, that's the easy part. But the mechanics which makes a smooth left to right movement for a Dobsonian base is in between the ground board and the bottom board. That's where I was interested how to make that movement smoother. And here's the optical tube when I saw it for the very first time. So I do not really know how it ended up in a furniture warehouse, which was apparently being liquidated. So it was somewhere where it did not belong. As you can see, even the 1.25 eyepiece adapter is missing from the focuser. So I just wanted to, you could say, save this optical tube because they had advertised it available for parts. They were selling it for parts. Maybe they did not know what this optical tube was going to be used for. As soon as I bought that optical tube, first thing which I did was I started looking at the custom designs of Dobsonian bases which people were making. And as you can see in these three images, regardless whether they are truss tube, this one I believe is also a truss tube. It just has a shroud around it. And this one's a cardboard tube, which can be, you could say, dissected. Anyhow, can anyone tell me what is one thing common between these three designs? They are Dobsonian designs, roughly, but what is the one common thing which stands out between three designs? That's right. So the giant side bearings. We do not see the giant side bearings in mass-produced telescope. They are usually tiny. Manufacturers will use workaround in case of Orions. If any of you have an Orion Dobsonian scope, you must have seen they use utility springs to hold the telescope down on a really small crescent on the side panel. So the idea is they push it towards the base. That increases the friction. In case of Skywatcher's stock base for the scope, which I found, they were pushing the side panels against the side bearings on the optical tube, which is again it's okay design when you're mass producing something, but when I talk to people who already had the same scope, they said they are not really happy about the movement for the up and down or the altitude. So I decided, even though I had no experience in carpentry ever, I have never even made a table before. I said, okay, I'm going to make a scope. If I'm going to make one, I better make it a good one. So I chose to make the one with bigger side bearings. Okay, so as you can see, as I was saying, side bearing was the thing which stands out in all custom designed Dobsonian bases. So since that moment, ever since I decided, whenever I had time, I was either watching people making scopes on YouTube or reading threads on cloudy nights. So all those threads and videos which I watched on YouTube and cloudy nights, yes, they were okay, but most of the work or instructions which they were sharing, they were being done by professionals who had years of carpentry experience behind them. They how do I say when they want to make a circle, it won't be wavy like it was in my case. When I tried to carve a circle out, it was wavy. Uh, so until I landed on this Telephane's how to make a Dobsonian base guide, what I loved most about this guide is it was not just instruction which they presented. They also told why were they using some parts and what is their purpose. And that's exactly what I was looking for. In all those instructions videos I saw on YouTube or Cloudy Nights, they were just, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. But they never told what is really the reason behind them. It was more of a cookie cutter approach. They saw it somewhere, they made it, presented it. But Telephane told us why is that design required, what benefit it has, which allowed me to take the parts which I needed and reject the ones which I did not need at all. So if you scroll down on that same web page, it's just a screenshot of their web page. If you scroll down, you can see they have segmented the process in very nice modules. So the first was finishing mount. That was the stage when you have already identified what's the balance point of the optical tube is. So here's the tube cradle. A tube cradle is just a box you attach side bearings to. Since my optical tube already had side bearings on it from the manufacturer, so I did not need to make it. I was able to skip on it. And then comes the altitude bearing, the part where I was interested in. Altitude bearings is just another name for side bearings. And this was the approach which Telephane instructions were going for. They were suggesting your altitude bearing diameter should be 1.7 times the diameter of your primary mirror or optical tube. In my case, my primary mirror diameter was 12 inches or slightly more than 12 inches. The problem was I did not had something to trace that big a circle. So I was stuck with the, how do I say, at the dust cap of my optical tube. So I decided I'll just go ahead with a 12-inch. That's more than enough. So as you can see in this design, the side bearings are going beyond the side panel. So I decided to stay within the side panel. Otherwise, the base would be just too wide. And here's the front panel. They suggested keep it about 1.5 inches shorter than the side panels, which I followed to the book, but I still ended up, I'll tell you guys what happened. Okay. So before I started to work on the wood and wasting any precious material, I decided to practice on cardboard first. So luckily my neighbor had just bought a shop vacuum and they were kind enough to lend me the box. So this was just a picture I took before tracing the parts. And after practicing a bit, once I felt confident, so I came up with this, you could say, a rough blueprint. It's not very technical, but it gave me an idea what parts I need or what I'm going to make. So in this design, you can see I was planning to make it at least 60 centimeters wide because all these instructions, this is just an summary, just a summary. All the instructions, I read about them from Telephane. So if you really want to get in technical details, I would highly recommend you to go to Telephane. They gave me an idea how wide how wide the side panels need to be, how wide the front panel needs to be if you want to fit your optical tube inside it. So they recommended at least giving 1/8 of clearance from the optical tube. Okay, and in there, all the color codes help me to identify what screws I was trying to use. So there were different screws for the foot pedals, which were hockey pucks. There was a giant screw to connect the ground board and the bottom board for the base. And this was the side bearing design I came up with. This was a M10 bolt, which went into the side bearing and then to the optical loop. Luckily, it already had a notch on it. I just had to take measurements, and they were international standards, not imperial. So yeah, I was able to find them easily. So at this stage, I realized maybe one bolt on each side might not be enough to hold the optical tube, because optical tube alone was 46 pounds. I did not want to risk it just on 2 bolts. So I added 2 additional bolts on each side. Initially, there was also another design update which I did. So throughout the process, as I mentioned, optical tube is really heavy. So I was wondering, if I put the optical tube on it, maybe the side panels might just collapse on the sides. So to retain them in upright position, I added side bearing retainers, as the cellophane website also suggests them. Even in the Skywatcher user manual, where you can find instructions how to assemble a base, when you go up over 12 inches, they also have side bearing retainers to hold the side panels, because otherwise it's just too much weight for them to handle. Okay. And this was my first, as you can see, there are no nails in it. So this was just a first initial image. I was just working on a Sunday afternoon, and I was trying to take this picture to show to my brother. Look, I managed to make it align with each other. But then I got photobombed by a monarch butterfly. Luckily, my phone had a feature. It gives me a opportunity to go after and before I tapped click. So I was able to make a GIF out of it. Now, if you notice in the front panel, as I suggested, I tried to follow the instructions to the book, keeping it about 1.5 inches shorter than the side panels. But later that turned out to be not enough, and I had to further cut the front panel to 4 inches more, because I was not able to lean the scope towards horizon anymore. Okay. So after I had passed the hurdle of aligning the side panels and the front panel together, it's not table, it's actually the bottom board of the Dobsonian base. Table is right here. So upper portion of the Dobsonian base, you could say it was roughly done, only assembly was required. And here is the left to right movement mechanism, or the mechanism between the ground board and the bottom board. So for the bottom board, I've followed John Dobson's suggestion to use a phonograph disc. He recommends it on all of his posts or forums which you can find. So I nailed the phonograph disc on the bottom board, and on the ground board, which has the feet on it, I nailed 3 Teflon pads. And when I bolted them together, the movement was smooth, no trouble at all. And you can see the hockey pucks, easy. And here is the image of the optical tube with the side bearings on it. As you can see, initially I had only installed 1 bolt in the middle, but then I added 2 more, which were M4. And here's the image from above the Dobson base. The front panel has been further shorted to 4 inches below. That's why you can see there's a tape on the whole pilot hole, which I had drilled to assemble it, but then I realized it's just too tall. And here are the side bearing retainers I was talking about. The edge, these are all melamine iron-on edges you can find in Home Depot for $5. They help to decrease the friction, and you have smoother altitude movement up and down. And here's the apple to apples comparison between the Skywatcher's stock base and my base. So it's somewhat similar design, but as you can see, I was saying Skywatcher's design pushes the side panels of the base towards the optical tube, and the optical tube side bearings have pads on them to increase the friction. As I said earlier, I asked some of the people who already had a Skywatcher. They said they were not really happy about it. Sometimes these screws are just too hard to fasten. No matter how much you fasten them, they will still be loose. And here's my design with the side bearings which fit in it. And so far, luckily, everything seems to be working fine. And that's it. Thank you very much. Any questions? I haven't had an opportunity to take it up because it has been cloudy, but I only finished it day before yesterday. Yeah, October 3rd. Yes, I finished it yesterday. I'm still kind of scared about taking it downstairs. It's stuck upstairs in a bedroom because it's just so heavy. Yes, please.
The one that you got, the two that you got, it came with all the mirrors and everything?
Yes, fortunately, yes, because when it was advertised, as I said, they were selling it for parts. So I was worried maybe the mirror might be damaged if it's not handled properly. But luckily, the mirror was intact. It was not damaged. Please.
How much time?
It took me 1 month. So if the reason I was able to track it so precisely. So if you recall, I posted a thread on August 21st that I found an optical tube and I was looking for instructions if anyone has ever made a Dobsonian base before. So I finished it on October 3rd, which was actually my birthday. So I gave myself the best birthday present. Yes, please.
So you hadn't done carpentry?
No.
Yeah. So then I.
Yeah. So about the tools. So the tools which I use for this project, not many fancy tools, just one jigsaw, a vise, which is very necessary to hold down the panel, especially when you're working alone, as a drill, and that is it, I guess. Yeah, a vise, drill, and a jigsaw. Please.
Nice to touch, but
Yeah.
why hockey pucks and not just pieces of wood or something else?
Hockey pucks are it's not I'll be honest, it was not my original idea. When I was looking through the cloudy nights and all the people who were making scopes by themselves, all of them were recommended hockey pucks because not only they're relatively cheaper when you go to a furniture store and try to buy feet for your base. Hockey pucks are made of rubber. Even if they ended up getting worn out, it will still be somewhat even. Yep. Yes, please. I will try my best. Mirror is 12 inches. It says 300p. I believe I haven't read it anywhere, but I believe the 300p stands for, as you can see over here, it says flex tube 300p. 300 millimeters, roughly 12 inches, but slightly more than 12 inches, so 300p. And the focal length is 1500. Yes, please. If you have ever seen me at the star parties or road, I usually carry around my 8-inch top, but I'm afraid I won't be able to do that with this scope because the optical tube, as I said, weighs 46 pounds, and the base which I made weighs 13 kilograms, which is still 5 kilograms less than the Skywatcher because in the instructions manual, they said their base weighs around 18 kilograms. Yes, please.
How do you lock this into your angle of sight, but it's getting moved to the side, plus getting after getting what's locking?
So you were saying how does it stays at its position where I left it? So the trick, if you go back on the, there it is. So on the Stellarfane Dobsonian Bay site, there's a dedicated section where they want you to find the, where to go? Yeah, there you go, the balance point. So the trick is the balance point. If you have your balance point figured out, if you leave it at, it's like a center of gravity. If you leave it at the balance point, the tube will not move. And manufacturer had fortunately already done that part for me because the scope had side bearings on it. So if you are wondering, the balance point of my optical tube was right here. Where'd it go? Here. So this is where the balance point of my scope would be. And I already had the side bearings on it. So I was lucky in that case. Any other questions?
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Yes.
So Sandy and I went to Chicago to see the Blue Jays play at Wrigley Field in August. It was August 15th to the 19th. And part of the deal was I got to go up to Yerkes Observatory. And Sandy went, "Why's that?" So I said, "You're going to come along and you're going to have fun." So we went to this place, and not only did Sandy find it interesting, she'd go back again. And she's a non-scientist. And I'll show you why in a bit. So why is it called Yerkes Observatory? This guy, Charles Yerkes. And he was your typical 19th century American capitalist. You know, so prior to moving to Chicago, Yerkes was a bond and commodities trader in Philadelphia. And he had just finished serving a 33-month sentence for larceny before he moved to Chicago. And through some complicated financial dealings, he bought a company called the North Chicago Street Railway. And through some more complex financial dealings, he ended up controlling the entire Chicago Street Railway system. So the guy had a few bucks. Yeah. So then along comes the University of Chicago. And it was founded in 1890 because John D. Rockefeller, another capitalist, that decided that Chicago needed a university. So the University of Chicago was just founded in 1890. So how did the observatory come about? These two guys. So George Ellery Hale, the ultimate telescope builder, because the Yerkes 40-inch was his first big telescope that he built. He went on to do Mount Wilson with the 60-inch and the 100-inch, and then Mount Palomar with the 200-inch that ended up being named after him. So he was very good at getting things done and persuading people to part with their money. William Rainey Harper was the president, chancellor of the University of Chicago. And in 1895, they decided to go visit the esteemed Charles Yerkes and convince him that he needed a legacy for his great contribution to the city of Chicago. And he basically ended up writing a blank check and just saying, "Well, yeah, make the observatory, whatever it costs, that's fine." So it ended up costing in our dollars, $27 million. So it was a nice hefty donation. And there's the building. And it's an architectural marvel. The University of Chicago walked away from this building in 2018. And it was going to be sold to a developer. And it was going to become condominiums. Yeah. So the local people that lived in the area got together and created the Yerkes Future Foundation and convinced the University of Chicago to sell it to them. They took it over in 2020, and they raised $21 million to refurbish this building. So it's an architectural marvel. The detail on it is incredible. So if you're going to go there and visit this, take the tour. Your tour starts here. And your tour guide will explain all the things on it. So if you look here, these columns, those are faces, incredible faces that are in there. Even John D. Rockefeller's face is carved into those pillars with a big nose. And they had a B above his nose in all of the carvings because it was a sting job. The term a sting came from that age. But Mr. Rockefeller didn't like it so much. So all the B's have been carved out. But the intricacy, you just walk in and you just look at this. And it's like, it's just amazing. The amount of detail, as opposed to our current modernist architecture where we think glass is wonderful. You know, the amount of time and detail. And the stonemasons that did this. You know, I wonder, do we still have stonemasons now? Or do we just get a computer to do it and a computer-assisted manufacturing system to carve it out? So it's a lost art. Then you walk into the foyer, and this is beautiful. It's, of course, you got to have Einstein staring at you from the corner there. But when they took over the building in 2020, they couldn't see the floor. It was covered in this layer of grime that had just been embedded into it. And the walls were all a sort of orangey gray color. Why? 120 years of people smoking in the building. Everything was covered and stained in nicotine. You know, so they, the people, so this is one of the first areas they restored to do that. So when they cleaned the floor off, they found this. And that's an amazingly beautiful floor. And they found, again, all these carvings and motifs all around the top of the building. And then when you look up, there's this beautiful stained glass that signs there. And all the architecture, the architect of this building wanted everybody to get there and think and look heavenwards. Everything points up all through the building. So the architectural design is to get you to think of the sky, the stars. So fascinating stuff. Then you go in and you meet your tour guide. And that's Walt. Walt is part of the foundation. Walt, I think, loves this building more than his own family. Just the way he just talks so passionately about it. And he's one of the tour guides. This is in the library, and they have all these antique instruments around. A 12-inch in the back of this room, and my picture didn't turn out very well, is a 12-inch all brass Newtonian reflector. The tube is all brass. Beautiful piece of equipment. So Walt takes you around. Recognize that picture? Yeah, everybody knows that one. That was taken in 1902. So that's the detail that the refractor could put out on glass plate film. And then here's another one. Recognize that? Pinwheel Galaxy? Yeah. So just the, you know, we think that CCD technology or now CMOS technology is the be all and end all, but the detail of a big glass plate with a photographic emulsion on it could get you incredible detail. This was probably taken by Edwin Barnard, who was a master, one of the earliest master astrophotographers. Then they take you up to the telescope. This thing is massive. That focal, the optical tube is 19.3 meters long, or if you prefer the old scale, that white tube, 62 feet long. So it's big. When I looked closer, that eyepiece in there is an Explore Scientific 40 millimeter. So I did the math, 19.3 meter focal length, 1.016 meter objective with a 40 millimeter eyepiece. That would give you 482 times. So a wee bit magic. You stick the same thing in my telescope and you get 30. So it's pretty amazing. And here's another view of it. The mount that's made by Warner and Swazi, and all steel, all welded and bolted together, and incredible. There's the stairs you need to climb it. If you don't, but you don't have to climb it because the floor moves. Floor goes up and down. So you get to increase it. This is what they raise the floor, and that's what's underneath it. That's the base. It's on a brick base, the foundation of it, that's built up from the concrete floor on that. And then if you look in the corners here, so if you see right here and right here, these are the counterweights and elevating mechanism to make the thing go upstairs. Still has the original electric motors in it, and they work just fine. And here's a close-up look. There's your Explorer scientific eyepiece. So you can look through the thing, even though, but it's the lens, the 40-inch lens or 1.02 meter lens, if you prefer the metric system, is color corrected for the blue part of the spectrum, because that was in 1897. That was what photographic emulsion was most sensitive to. So it was originally built more as a photographic telescope than a visual telescope. Although I can you just imagine the view of Saturn or Jupiter through this thing? 19-meter focal length, 480 times. It would be pretty spectacular. And of course, here's your go-to mechanism. See those round wheels there? This is setting circles that they use. That setting circle, this one here, that is probably about 4 meters in diameter. So it's big. So you can see it from where you're operating the telescope. And it amazes me how they showed, Walt showed how well balanced this telescope is. Just pick it up and move by hand. But you got to remember, it's several hundred tons. So as you move it, it's not going to stop in a hurry, and it's just going to take you with it. And then after you tour the telescope, they take you up to the second floor, and there's the library. And the library was really neat because it's as the library, basically as it was in the 1930s. And you get some great titles here. Like you get Special Theory of Relativity, Instrumentation for the Study of Extreme Ultraviolet Radiation. But it also, remember, most of us are old enough going to the library, and there was a little card in the back of the book. Well, they're still there, and you can pull the card out and you can see people like Carl Sagan, Edwin Barnard. Their names are on those cards. And then Walt had to show us a story of, opened up, and there's a note in the book, Doris, I'm very lonely. Can you meet me in the library at 8? So hey, that was probably a PhD student and making a note to wonder. So we, of course, wonder what happened. Inquiring minds want to know. And then you need a 10-digit calculator, all mechanical. This is where I date myself. When I started in banking in the dark ages, when you could still smoke in the office, I used one of these things to balance at the end of the day. Except mine, instead of electric, it was all mechanical, and you had to pull the arm to go to the next one. Yeah. So when my kids tell me I'm old, I go, yeah, I'm so old, I lived before the internet. And then we finish off in the library, and there's Walt introducing, Albert Einstein, the most famous person to visit the Yerkes Observatory. So all the pictures you see when you look at, you look up Wikipedia for that, you'll have Albert there. He spent 4 hours. There are so many more people that I think made just as much of a contribution to science as Albert, but they did it in this building. So people like Sherburne Burnham, he cataloged 13,665 double stars here. Yeah, and you ever heard of Burnham's catalog? That's where it was done. Yeah, Edwin Barnard refined his astrophotography thing. Edwin Hubble, we named a telescope at him because Edwin Hubble kind of figured out, whoa, this universe is expanding. Why? We're still arguing over what the rate is, but he figured out it's expanding. Nancy Grace Roman, we're naming another telescope. She did her postdoc here. Carl Sagan did his graduate degree here. So a lot of very important, very famous people were there. And the other neat thing about this is Frost, the director of the observatory after George Ellery Hale left. And by the way, Hale was only director of this place for 5 years before he decided that it's time to go to California. So Frost, who took over after him, didn't his attitude was, if you can do science, doesn't matter what gender you are. So women were not only an integral part of the observatory, not like at Harvard where they were allowed to do the calculations, they were allowed to use the telescope for their own research projects too. They couldn't vote, but they could do science. So that's kind of neat. Here's, and just another, as I was leaving, I had to take this picture. These are griffins. They're called griffins. Gargoyles have to have water coming out of them. All right, but this one's just done there because it looks nice. So, labor must have been cheap in 1895 or 1897 to be able to do that. And I just thought, the winged lion, as that is, look kind of neat. And then there's the door on the other side. And that was a catering truck. Just after, as our tour finished, they were setting it up somebody was having a wedding reception in there afterwards. So kind of neat place to get married. And then just a dome on the 40-inch. I thought it was kind of neat. So questions, queries, tribulations. If you're going, take the tour. Walt, who is a member of the foundation, loves the place, and he has everything that happened in there memorized. Alan.
Is it good for visual?
Yeah, it's good for visual, and they would use a minus violet filter to take out the trim. This is also one of the earliest astronomical spectrographs where it's used on this telescope.
And one of your first constellations or?
Yeah, it was. It is a constellation, and yeah, but I can't remember. Or Mercury, the winged messenger. I don't know, but these go take the tour. John.
Real science.
They are doing real science now there again. They now have on staff a PhD astrophysicist who is also one of these engineering adepts, so that as more funding comes in, they restore more and more equipment. But what they're using it now, they're using it for like occultation. So to study asteroid occultation. On that, they're doing some photometry with it. So the telescope is being used. And don't forget, if we go back, this is just not the only telescope there. In this dome right here has a 24-inch reflector in it that has all the modern gifts, and that's the one they use for public viewing. Is in that one, and then there's a 40-inch reflector there that is still used can still be used for research as well. So it is still being used for research, but it is also being used as a center to explore the intersection of arts and science. So the weekend after we left, they were having a composer that was performing in the 40-inch dome and performing her musical compositions, space related, of course, in the dome. So they have pretty much regularly active arts and culture programs in the building as well. So it's being used, and I just like the attitude. No, that's not going to happen. We're going to raise some money, and they raised $21 million. We're very fortunate here in Toronto that the David Dunlop Observatory is being well taken care of. This one almost went away. Yeah. Well, it's too bad. I can't have it. Yeah. And I'm sure this place will be, because it's right on the shores. If you turn around from that, and right behind me is the Lake Geneva shore, big lake with lots of, it's kind of like the Chicago's version of Lake Muskoka. Your $10 million cottage, where the boathouse is bigger than my house. That's there on Lake Geneva.
But they're naturally big time like pollution issues.
It's not so bad there. It's 75 miles north of Chicago. So it's not like it's right in the city like Dunlop, but it has the same problem we do. It's in the Great Lakes Basin. So more cloud than sun. It's a dumb place to put a telescope. But Sandy loved it. She loved the stories about the especially, Doris meet me. And whenever you see somebody share their passion for something, it's enjoyable no matter what it is. So go. And by the way, been there, bought the t-shirt.
Okie dokie. Time, gentlemen. Hey, Ragav. Hello, Ragav. Thanks, guys. Yeah. I promised my wife I was getting out on time tonight, so we can't delay. That's true. Bunch of rowdies. We now have a talk by Pravesh Dave, and I'd like him to come up and yammer away.
Hey guys, I just wanted to give a talk on common myths and misconceptions in astronomy. Sorry? I don't know yet. Haven't seen any evidence. Yeah, these are something that, I just came across myself. Some of these I thought were true, but weren't, until I seriously joined RASC and got into astronomy and stuff like that, which was last November, and holy cow, time flies fast. But yeah, basically, we may hold some beliefs about astronomy, that aren't entirely accurate. And that's a lovely part about science. It's ever changing, things we might take as facts today, we might get more information later on. But most of these that I'll cover today, they usually stem from facts we heard from people, teachers in middle school, younger days, from popular media. I know one of the facts here is from, I don't know if you guys remember, my parents bought me, it was early 2000s. It's those cue card looking things with facts and figures. They're like kind of long form Brainiacs, I think it was called, where you like flip the thing. So one of them's from there as well. So yeah, it's, and a lot of these were also gathered from talking to friends and family, and just some other stuff as well that I found while trying to dig more into it. Another thing is, I guess I was talking to Raghav about this, and we can, sort of use these as a way, because I've been asked some of these at Riverwood when we had our public star parties. And, at that time I kind of just stammered and wasn't really straight with my answer, but hopefully we can use these as a gentle way to push people in the right direction instead of being just laughing at them like, haha, you don't know that. Because there's a lot of these I kind of thought, were true. The first one, this blew my mind. What is the color of the sun? Right? When I always thought it was yellow. I mean, all I have to do is look up. I've been looking up for 30 years and it's been yellow, reddish, orange, you know, it's always been there. You know, you have a child color a picture, it's going to be orange. You know, you see photographs and stuff like that, depictions, it's always orange. Turns out it's actually white. It emits lights in, you know, all colors of the spectrum. This is a picture from the ISS. And it's as white as it gets, you know, it's all the colors of the spectrum in there, all blend into bright white. So this is actually the thing that got me interested in this topic, because I was like, what else am I, you know, taking things as fact, but it's actually not true, or just misconceptions, I would say, not even myths, just misconceptions. Another one, the sun is burning or on fire. This one is a bit insidious as well, because any pictures you see, even from professional astrophotographers or just general astrophotographers, you know, we tried to get all these details of the sun, and it kind of looks like there's flames shooting out of the sun. So it's very easy to think that, you know, the sun is actually burning and it's on fire. Especially in movies, if there's always like a burning special effect when we zoom into the sun, stuff like that. But well, we know that, you know, there's nothing burning. The sun's generating energy and light through nuclear fusion, you know, not combustion. And fire requires a source of oxygen. And from what I remember, there's very trace amounts of oxygen in the sun, like I think less than 0.5% or so, or around there. But yeah, basically it's all nuclear fusion that's taking place, and that's what's generating the energy and the light that we see. So, you know, not much campfire shenanigans going on. It's just nuclear fusion. This one, Jupiter is so big, it could have been a star if it was a little bit bigger. This is one of the brainiac things that I was talking about. I took this as a fact until I looked into it for this presentation, actually. And I was like, oh, is that actually true? And turns out it's not. It lacks the mass to have the pressure and temperature needed for fusion. From what I read, it would have to be at least 80 times bigger to turn into a star. I think the number was 88. I know if it was slightly less than 88, around 60 or 70, it could turn into a brown dwarf. But it's nowhere close to being a star. I mean, it's huge. It's the biggest planet in our solar system, but nowhere close to being a star. This one was interesting. Comet tails always trail behind the comet. I mean, when you think about it, like in Earth terms, when you're here, you know, if you have like a stick of incense or something and you wave it around, the smoke's going to follow it. And, you know, you would think logically that, okay, if the comet's moving this direction, the tail's going to move the opposite direction. But turns out that's not actually true. The comet tail points away from the sun, regardless of the direction of its motion. In fact, there's a point where the tail actually leads the comet. So when the comet's coming in, you can see my pointer. Yeah, when the comet's coming in, the tail's, you know, away from the sun. You know, around here it might look like it's just actually the tail is behind the comet, but when it's going away, it's actually leading the comet. So that was another interesting thing that I never really thought about, and thought to share. Oh, this is another one. The asteroid belt is a densely packed region in our solar system. This one, I think the reason it's thought of it this way is because of all these fancy graphics that we get, right? We see, you know, we get maps from a lot of these reputable sources. You know, NASA has it. I got this off of NASA, and it shows the amount of asteroids and stuff, you know, just before the gas giants, and they look so densely packed. But unfortunately, you know, even with the dots and the amount of asteroids in there, it just makes it look like it's just a solid wall surrounding us, you know, keeping us in, and we can't really get out of it. But as with anything else in space, the objects in the asteroid belt, they're spread out across vast distances. I was reading a funny story about Pioneer 10 that did a mission to Jupiter. And I think the people working on Pioneer 11 were waiting on tenterhooks to figure out if Pioneer 10 was going to crash into an asteroid when going to Jupiter, because they were doing Pioneer 11 was going to Saturn. And I heard there was like a big sigh of relief when it just safely reached all the way to Jupiter without any incident. And then we had Pioneer 11 after that, also successfully reaching Saturn. This one is a bit embarrassing. This one is a personal story, actually. Location of moon during its phases. So we all know moon goes through phases, right? And my sister is a nurse. She was telling me about time, like they have a superstition where they don't like to take shifts during the full moon. And I was like, oh, no way, there's no correlation. And she's like, I know, but no one likes to take a shift. There's a superstition, and all the crazy people come out and stuff like that. So I was like, all right, fair enough. But that kind of locked me into thinking that since I knew that there's no correlation between the phase of the moon and human behavior, because the moon's just there's just varying amounts of shadow. That locked me into thinking that the moon's always there at night. And it wasn't until I started actually looking at the moon for doing observing that I realized the moon actually disappears a lot of the time. Like, sure, there's no effect on the human behavior, but I always thought it's because, the moon's still there, it's just covered by a shadow. So it doesn't make sense that it would affect human behavior between full moon and new moon. But it turns out, the moon rises and sets at different times during the phases of the moon. And like, for example, during new moon, it's like very early in the dawn, and then it sets near dusk, right? And I don't know why I didn't put it together. I've seen the moon during the daytime, but but I always thought, it's always at the same place at night. It always rises and sets, and even when there is a new moon, like it's just there. I just can't see it, and so I don't know why I didn't put two and two together. It was until I started tracking the moon phases for observing, I was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense. Ooh, this one's one coming from media mostly, movies and stuff. Shows black holes are the cosmic vacuum cleaners. Usually when there's a black hole in like Simpsons, I think there was an episode, at the moment a black hole is plonked down in the scene, everything just starts getting sucked in. People are hanging on for their dear lives, and I think Homer Simpson lost his clothes or something. But that's not actually true. I'm sure we all know, like, black holes don't suck things in. They're just like any other celestial bodies. If we replaced our sun with a black hole, same size, we won't even feel it. We would be dead and it would be very cold, but that's because there's no light. But we just, the Earth will just keep orbiting, although, anything near the event horizon is fair game. If you get that close, then bye-bye. But unless you have those Star Trek solutions, I think what they do in the movie, they exploded the engine cells or something to get some boost or something like that. Yeah, the warp drive. Yeah. Although I think that was like a red matter black hole or something. But I'm not sure if it works that way. But yeah, basically, if you plonk one down, you won't feel it. You won't have any sunlight, but yeah, you won't feel it. This one, Mercury is the hottest planet in our solar system. This is another one that's basically logical. If you think about it for just like half a second, you would say, okay, that makes sense, right? It's the closest planet to the sun. It's getting all that sunlight. Of course, it's going to be the hottest planet. But turns out it has a very thin atmosphere, which doesn't retain any of the heat. And is Venus instead that's the hottest planet in our solar system. It has a really thick atmosphere. A lot of runaway greenhouse effects happened back in the day, and now it just traps all the heat. As I think it's like 900 degrees Celsius at the surface around there. So, it's pretty dang hot. Space is silent. This one I was a bit hesitant to put because I couldn't get a proper consensus on. You would think space would be silent, right? Because sound waves can't propagate in a vacuum. You need some medium for sound waves to propagate. But I was reading that there might be a chance, regions of space which are dense enough with gases and particles that may be able to transmit some sound waves in lower frequencies. I kind of ran out of time while I was doing research, but I am interested in this topic to see how true this is. I mean, again, as with all the other topics that I covered here, it makes logical sense when you think about it for half a second, but there's always like a catch here or there. So I'm a bit more skeptical now. But yeah, regions of space, apparently some of them are dense enough. Gases and particles will be able to transmit some sound waves in lower frequencies. And I know NASA has done some of these where they just encoded the radio waves that they captured from like pulsars and black holes and stuff like that. Kind of like how we translate our radio waves into sound. Did the same thing. Really cool if you guys ever get a chance to, just jump online, give it a listen. It's very eerie and kind of spooky, but it's there. You can hear what a black hole sounds like technically. This is another one. The Big Bang was actually a bang. I thought that too, even though, I kind of studied and looked at a lot of stuff surrounding the Big Bang. I always just assumed that, okay, it was a bang, because that's what a lot of media has it too. I think it was like an episode of Family Guy where there was just like an explosion and there's galaxies flying out, right? But that's not actually how it ended up. It would be more accurate to call it a big expansion instead of a big bang. It's not an explosion in the Earth sense. It's just a rapid expansion of everything. I think one of the reasons, not too sure if this is like an urban legend or how true it is, the reason it was called the Big Bang was because of the person who came up with this, and he looked like this. He was a Catholic priest. I will try to pronounce his last name, but I don't think I'll do a good job. I'm sure we can read it there. But yeah, I mean, the way the clothes he wore, the fact that he was a Catholic priest, a lot of people in science at the time just called it, oh, he's just talking about the Big Bang Theory. That's what he has. Because his talk was basically, it just came from nothing and there was a sudden expansion of everything. So something from nothing type of thing was going on. Oh yeah, for sure. His Wikipedia page is like long.
I think it's actually coined by Moore, wasn't it? It was the competing theory.
Yeah. Steady state universe theory, yeah.
Denigrate this competing theory. His made so much sense.
Yeah. I read that. It was I kind of didn't want to name drop, but yeah, it was pretty much a jab at for person here, but like I mean the name stuck, and we always talk about, there's a show after the theory, there's no steady state theory show, there's a Big Bang Theory, so I guess it worked out for him at the end. This one's the last one. Weather is clear on the night of testing newly acquired astronomy gear. I don't care what the science says, this is not a myth. Like, I don't care what the science says. It's always going to be. He had it cloudy. He couldn't 12-inch Dobsonian. He couldn't test it out. As always. I mean, today it started raining. We were talking about going out to folks of credit, and it started raining in the afternoon. Like, what the heck? Yeah, it's nice and clear now. Yeah, that was it. If you guys have any misconceptions you might have held, it would be that is a good one. That's a good question. Just
It's true. I saw it on the internet.
yeah, that's what I went with. Well, I just wanted to share this a little bit. I just started last year and I had these misconceptions. And I kind of just worked through them, and then digging through this rabbit hole, there were some things that I still thought were true that weren't actually true. And I'm sure we'll have people at the Riverwood Nights and other star parties that we do that might ask questions like this. So, if we can just clear them gently and appreciate the thought process behind it, and then, sort of gently steer them, because that's what I tried to share, especially with the moon phase one. I was trying to get to why I thought the moon's always in the sky, even when there's a new moon. Kind of just steer them in the right direction. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Any questions? Anything to share? Oh, good.
Thanks very much.